Thanks so much for coming to join us today. My name's Sonia Sedler from Keyword Studios. I'm Group COO, and today I'm joined by the wonderful John Doyle, COO of Riot Games, the knowledgeable Kate Kellogg from Electronic Arts, and the magnificent Matt Booty from Xbox Studios. And I just want to say, these people, I'm just honored to be here sitting with them today. You know, I like to think of you guys as friends, but the giants of our industry, and I love that. So thanks for joining us today. So as I said, today we're here to talk about the Great Resignation. You know, what is the Great Resignation? It's something that is actually a bit of a new phenomenon. The phrase was coined by a chap called Anthony Klotz. He coined that phrase. He talked about the Great Resignation and used the term in Bloomberg Businessweek in May 21 last year. What was really, really interesting was that that term that he coined, it was underpinned by data. And now it's become more of an economic movement. That data, so if I just look at some information, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, in April 2021, they reported the highest ever level of people quitting their jobs. 3.99 million people in April. That's 3.99 million Americans. Around the same time, an HR software company, they surveyed workers across the pond where I come from, UK and Ireland. And at that point, they were saying that 37% of the workforce were considering moving their workforce, their jobs. They wanted to find something else. And then in August 2021, the Americans cited their highest ever number, 4.27 million Americans motivated to start a new job. So what is this about? Today, we're going to cover the whats, the whys, the hows, what can we do about it with this amazing panel. Let me just start off with the what is it. So what is the Great Resignation? You know, I'm going to share some interesting data with you because my opinions, I like to underpin them with data. Let me just share with you that the gaming industry, they surveyed a bunch of employees and said that here were the top data that we received. Some of the reasons that people were leaving their jobs was that they were saving money on commuting. So 83% wanted to either work closer or work from home. 73% said that they were looking for an enhanced work-life balance. 61% said they wanted to spend more time with their family. Well, I can tell you, out of that 61%, my family are not that interested in spending so much more time with me. So that's why I'm here in Vegas and not at home. 40% talked about taking up more hobbies. And then 26%, on a more serious note, talked about childcare and the importance of childcare, easing of challenges with childcare. That's a really important statistic to remember. What we want to talk about is, as leaders, what can we do? There's this once-in-a-generation lifetime opportunity to reimagine the future of our workforce. And it's incumbent on ourselves as leaders to try and think about how we can be better leaders, but to support our workforce in what will become the new normal for our workforce. So today, to kick us off in our discussions, I'm handing over to Kate. Kate, just help us identify, you know, what can leaders do to retain talent?
Starting with the super easy ones, right? Like right off the top. I mean, I think retention at this time connects to a lot of things that always are what we work on for retention. The first is, are you living up to your promise as a company or as a team? People come to our teams on purpose. They all have choices, they're very talented, and so we have to make sure we're hitting that expectation around what they get to work on and how we support them and the culture we build. Additionally, I think one of the other things we've seen over the last few years is how important development options are. Whether it's increases in responsibility or the ability to grow or develop tangential skills or grow their leadership options. All of these things really, really matter, and those are key levers that we need to focus on. At the same time, I think everyone in this room has experienced the increased pace of movement in our industry, and the boundaries of that industry have also stretched out. And so we see interviews that used to take 6 weeks now happen on Tuesday with an offer on Wednesday with a start date on Monday. And that has created some things that work well and some things that don't. But the reality is we've always had big competition in our industry, and so I think there's a huge opportunity for us to think about how we continue to live up to that promise. One of the other things that's happened during the pandemic is we've seen people ask themselves the question, how am I spending my time? And is it how I want to? And I think that's super important. I want people to answer that question, because if you're not working on what you want to work on, like, there are choices out there. So it's up to us to make what we work on be worth it.
Thank you. That's great. John, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think that was a really awesome answer. So, and I agree with everything you've said. I think one thing about what we've seen with calling this the Great Resignation, and then I think in games we've seen more of I think someone else coined the term, maybe even you, Matt, a reshuffle. So we're not necessarily seeing people leaving games as much as we're seeing people move to opportunities that make sense to them. We've seen a lot of boomerangs back to Riot during this time. So a lot of folks leaving and coming back, and a lot of folks leaving now to do new things. And I think that's been accelerated and is the new normal.
Matt, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd echo the great stuff that Kate said. I think that when it comes to retention, that like many things over the last 2 years, the responsibility and really the burden that we put on our line managers will come to the front. In the absence of these sort of organic relationships that get formed inside a game studio, I think the deliberate relationships between a direct manager and the employee become even more critical in terms of retention. And although that is yet another responsibility that falls on our line managers, I think that is another factor that will really increase. That we've got to put the effort into getting to know people one-on-one in the absence of some of those more organic relationships that form.
Thank you. So we've talked about relationships, how important it is to lean into and be in tune with our people, our teams. What is it that we can do to help to motivate them, and for us to respect the fact that they have time and things that they want to do. We need to ensure that they retain that work-life balance, and really that we respect that time of work-life balance. Sometimes that's not always respected when you're working from home. You find yourself being available at any time. But a lot of people say that there are positives from working from home. And others say that, we're looking forward to coming back into the workplace. So Matt, let me just ask you, are you looking forward to coming back into the workplace? How do you feel about it? And what are the positives?
Well, there's a couple questions in there. First, I think like all of us, the things that we are excited about is seeing people in person that we haven't seen in a long time. Even just being part of here and seeing people that maybe we've only met on screen, or seeing people that we haven't seen in years is a big part of it. Over and over, I hear about phrases like the magic that happens inside a game studio, the happy accidents, the things of bumping into people and just sort of drive by in offices. We're just missing that. And I think, we work in entertainment, we work in a creative field. Those things, I think, we're excited to get back. In terms of some of the things that we've learned that are actually better with how we've been working, first, I think, is just that it's an opportunity for people who have a different communication style, have a different voice, that they can get their voice heard in a meeting. At least for us, this dynamic has really evolved where there's meetings that happen in parallel to the meeting in the chat. And there are just some people who are more effective typing things out, and you can interject thoughts and you can sort of cue things up. So the different communication styles that have emerged over the last 2 years is a big one. It goes without saying that as our industry matures and we bring more people into our industry, that having the flexibility around childcare, being able to be at home, work around school schedules, I think has been a big one. And some of the sort of less tangible things, I think that creativity and entertainment, I don't know that they happen on a 9-to-5 schedule. I think the roots of video games going back to when I got started in the 90s, it was not a traditional business enterprise environment. And that led to a lot of creativity. That also led to a lot of things that we're happy to hopefully have behind us, things like crunch culture and sort of, working too late and things like that. But I think that a little bit of that we've been able to embrace now, where people can work on their own time schedule. So I just look forward to hopefully some of the more creative aspects of this coming back, and that we can keep those, but while also leaning in on some of the benefits that come from just trying to make entertainment in person.
That's really interesting. So we're talking about ensuring that we maintain that creativity that we have to have within our industry to keep up. How do you find that at Electronic Arts, Kate? Just tell us.
I think one of the things that I think about a lot when we talk about, people all the time are talking about return to office or back to normal. And I always, when people say that, I always think about Luke Cage, that it's always forward, right? We don't want to be doing what we did before because we found new things that we can do. And one of the things we found at Electronic Arts is that there is definitely not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. Our teams are taking some different approaches for how they're going to work going forward, and I think that's super interesting. There's a lot of place for us to test and learn and take those learnings forward, because there have been some pretty big unlocks. I will say, though, being with all of you and being in a space like this, it's so invigorating and exciting. I cannot wait till the holiday party for next year. It's just, you miss a little something.
So John, you know a little bit about the partying thing. You were playing Dungeons and Dragons last night, weren't you? Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts.
I mean, I could describe the D&D game, but it was normal. And I've been playing pretty routinely online for 2 years, so it was actually really nice to sit around a table with folks again. I was in our office in LA a couple of weeks ago, and the amount of quick conversations I could have, quick coffees, sit-downs with lunch that were unplanned, were fantastic. And it's the kind of thing that through the pandemic, really, I can talk to people who are on my schedule in half-hour blocks. It's been very difficult to have those organic conversations. So I look forward to that part getting a little better as we get more time in the office coming back. And I think I think everyone up here knows that and everyone out in the audience knows that collaboration is key in a creative industry. And how we get that collaboration, it can vary by team, by company, but we know that it's critical to our ability to be able to deliver things to players that they really want. We're going to take an approach at Riot where we're in the office about 3 days a week, but giving people flexibility on the outside on Mondays and Fridays, and try to make sure that we can have those collaboration moments occur. But I think the days of 5 days a week back in the office are probably done for this industry.
Yeah, that's. I think I agree with you there. I joined Keywords about a year ago, very similar to yourself, Kate. I joined during lockdown, and we've got 10,000 people in our organization. I was thinking, how on earth am I going to get to know 10,000 people? Well, the beauty of being online is you can get to see almost 10,000 people's faces over the space of a year. So from that aspect, it was great, but it did feel like I was always available and took global to a new scale. But the best thing that I found was when our chief executive, Bertrand, joined the organization, he had decided we'd just literally come out of lockdown in Europe, and Bertrand's like, that's it. You, me, John, the CFO, we're going to go traveling, we're going to meet all of our team. The difference was phenomenal from the relationship that you have with someone where you've developed a relationship almost online, dare I say, and meeting them face to face and actually being able to have that creative bond. And when I think about our customers, the level of creativity that we need to draw upon to support the likes of Microsoft, Riot, and Electronic Arts, it's just so important that you have those relationships, and you need to be almost in the same place to have those relationships. There's also the fact that we haven't considered, which is security. From our aspect, we're working in some secure environments to support our customers. Sometimes you've just got to be in the office. How did you feel, Kate, when you started to meet people, coming out of being in lockdown and then starting to actually meet people?
I mean, I think that happened yesterday. We've been in a pretty hard lockdown, so I'm still experiencing it. But it's been super exciting, and I know I'm really looking forward to going out and seeing the teams in person. I mean, there's nothing like walking the floor with a game team. The vibe that you get, the interaction, and like, I think there's something interesting. You were talking about relationships, John. One of the things I think about is, especially when you don't know people super well or you're new in relationships, maybe there's an awkward moment in a meeting, and you don't have that minute walking to get coffee to check in, to see if everything's cool, or like to walk back someplace else and just kind of say, oh, I hope you have a great night. It's all so formal. I think it puts a lot of pressure on leaders in particular to be really intentional about the culture you build and the interactions and finding ways to connect in that way when we don't have all of that same kind of happenstance, the happy accidents that Matt was talking about.
That's a fantastic observation. I think that, again, coming back to the type of relationships, what I'm hearing today is, you know, that relationship piece is going to be so critical in the future, and probably even more critical when we move back into more of a hybrid working environment. But there's going to be that new normal, and that new normal means that we have to explore different approaches. As leaders, we need to evolve. What do you think that means for us as leaders, John?
Well, I mean, one comment I want to make is the most important thing about seeing people in person is finding out how tall everyone is, because there's no way to know that when we're all online. But I think, you know, one thing we learned through the pandemic is we can actually build and ship really good games when we're all spread out all over the place. I think we've all acknowledged that there's a lot of value in getting folks together, some cadence, especially at various points in the development process. Maybe, you know, it might be a different cadence during production than it might be during concept or during finaling. But getting folks together and doing that social thing is fairly key. But I think the normal probably looks like a very flexible world where we know that everyone is in individual situations. We know that things that may have been less common before the pandemic are now very common. People needing to relocate to take care of family, people needing to find childcare, people not being able to do that commute every single day. And then the new normal looks like us figuring out how to get the best talent in the world and do it in a way that works for that talent.
Thank you. Haven't you found, Matt, that human connection has really, really changed since you've been working a lot virtually and online, that you suddenly get to see people in different environments? You could be having a meeting and your child suddenly walks into the room and you're supposed to be pretending to be that teacher, virtual teacher for your children whilst you're focusing on a meeting. Have you had those kinds of situations where, you know, with your team you would never have noticed things like that, but now you do, and it just becomes part of that whole relationship balance?
Yeah, well, my highest rated AMA to date is the one where my cat walked into the scene, so that might say a little something about the content of the AMA or my cat, I'm not sure. To your question about leadership, you know, our CEO, Satya Nadella, he has a thing he talked about, which is the hybrid paradox, which is that we are seeing more than ever a demand for flexibility in the workplace, but at the same time, there is a desire for more connection than ever. In an increasingly complex world, people crave that human connection. And I think we've heard about that here. To your question about, you know, what does that mean for leaders? I think the two words we've heard here, deliberate and intentional. It just, everything has got to be steered toward a deliberate, intentional desire to either set the cultural values and norms that Kate talked about, those sort of reach outs and one-on-ones, but again, things just aren't going to happen because you've got a bunch of people in the same building bumping into each other. You're going to really have to be intentional about it. And so I think for leaders to almost overstate and over-clarify, which will seem awkward at first, but knowing that, you know, some percentage of that gets lost going through the internet, I think is going to be important for leadership going forward.
That's such an important point. Yesterday, I was speaking with some of my colleagues and we were talking about that phrase of things get lost in translation. They really do when you're texting, messaging. How do you keep up to date with that when you're new in an organization? You don't get to know people. Have you found different methods of adopting the new future forward approach, Kate?
That's an interesting question. I think we're trying different things all the time. One of the things we've really leaned into, I was talking before about development, and one of the benefits of this time we have now, we do a lot of mentorship and sponsorship programs. I'm sure lots of folks here do things like that. But we found an ability to connect people across geographic locations, which has been excellent. Sometimes the best mentor is pretty far away, and when everyone's accustomed to being in person, it's like, that's not really gonna work. So we've seen some really authentic connections come through that I think is really valuable. We also have tons of, and we're still learning and growing on this, our Slack channels are super interesting around affinity groups or work projects to help people feel that sense of community. We have one that I love from our content makers that's made in isolation, which are non-work projects that people are doing at the side while they have time at home, and they've shared all kinds of awesome things. A lot of Ghostbusters gear. I don't know, it seems to be an interesting one. But one of the other things I was thinking about around connection, and Matt, something you were talking about made me think about this, is going through these last couple of years together, it's been really scary at times and very uncertain, and we didn't all know what was happening. And so I think there was a space where I saw, at EA in particular, but I saw our leaders acknowledge that. And so we're in our homes, things are different, we don't know what the next couple of months are gonna bring. And I think acknowledging that and recognizing that creates a space of psychological safety. And that's really important, and that's when people can bring their whole selves to work, that's how you get their best work. When they can acknowledge things are tricky at home, that relieves the pressure of perfection, because all of us are learning all of the time. And so that's something I really want to see us bring forward, and I think it's a huge value for all of us to bring that open style of leadership.
I love that, Kate. It's just so important that we don't forget about that human connection that you actually can make, because everyone's working from home. We sometimes become that much more emotional. 2020 saw a really difficult year for most people. Everyone was touched by someone that had had COVID or someone in someone's family that had suffered from COVID. It was an emotional time. It was a really difficult time. Economically, it was a hard time. And now we're looking at moving forward and how we establish those relationships. And I think it's really important that we recognize that people have come from a very emotional part of a work-life balance environment. And approaching things such as mental health are also really key. Matt, have you got anything you can share with us that Microsoft might be doing in terms of mental health and what you do in terms of supporting employees?
Well, first of all, we are very lucky to have the entirety of Microsoft behind us, which is not just Xbox, but all 180,000 people. And that is a time when we have certainly relied on all of HR and all of our ERGs and all the communities within Microsoft and Xbox in terms of just the actual support and all the resources that we've got together. I think that it really does come back. I just would echo and reinforce what Kate said, that it's just about, I think, being open and authentic about the challenges that everyone's had. There were certainly times that I was, watching teams struggle and going through struggles of our own, and everybody had production challenges, and just was talking with somebody this morning, the number of coworkers that we've got with kids that are of elementary and high school age particularly seem to have been hit by the isolation, and these are things that are disruptive. So I think just removing any hesitation or stigma about being able to talk about those things has been an important first step. And again, to Kate's point, this whole thing has just been sort of stumble forward. We all went home and sort of figured that out, and then tried to figure out how to keep making games, because we thought this would last for a couple months, and then how are we going to actually ship big games, things like Halo and Battlefield. How's that going to happen? And it seems like just about the point when we get that figured out, now we're into the next phase. So just being willing to just state what is, and grounding everybody that this is kind of our reality right now, I think is the most important thing we can do as leaders. And again, leaning in, if ever there was a time to lean in on people across the industry, people within your company, the ERGs, game communities, formal HR resources, the last couple of years have been it.
I love that. It is all about leaning in and really getting to know your people, getting to know your team. It's so funny that we learn how to have an establishment where we're working from home from a point where, as leaders, there were so many organizations that were saying, no, everyone has to be in the office. There won't be any hybrid working. And then suddenly, nature just takes over and everyone's working from the office, and we're just starting to trailblaze and create new normals. So now what we need to think about is, what's it going to be like in the next phase, where some people will expect to work from home. Some people will want that hybrid environment. How are Riot preparing for that jump?
Well, I think the important thing is preparing for, because we're not quite there yet, where we're still all working from home. We have some teams back in the office on a voluntary basis, essentially beta testing what the office is like now in the new world, but we don't expect to be back even in our hybrid form, kind of the 1-3-1 thing we're doing, until later this year. So preparing for that is a lot of understanding that everyone's in somewhat different circumstances. We're not just going to say, here's the date on Monday, or Tuesday, everyone come into the office, but we're going to work on a team-by-team basis to figure out who are the right folks to bring back in a staged way, and we're going to learn a lot on, in the way that we work. So we've learned to work a particular way while everyone is home. Now, if you have folks back in the office, certainly during the pandemic, Riot went from when I started 2.5 years ago to we only make games in LA with some support in other parts of the world to we're going to make games all over the world. And we're going to open offices to attract talent all over the world. And that is a pretty monumental shift without a pandemic in the middle of that. I mean, it's normal for some companies, but very new for Riot. And I think figuring out how we're going to build the muscles to work across the date line, around the globe, and have people in different offices around the world working smoothly together is probably the big challenge we have going forward.
Yeah, I think that today there's this issue around resource constraint, and particularly in that developer environment, finding developers. And why wouldn't there be? It's such a competitive environment. And if you are able to find an offer of being able to support whatever your work-life balance is, you're going to go for that. What it means that it's incumbent on us understanding what that work-life balance is for each individual. It's going to be different by gender, by age, by country, by culture. It's going to be so different. And what it means is that we're going to have to be so much more flexible. We're going to have to, as Matt says, lean in much more. And I think it's going to be us touching on what is it that we can help our team with and really laser focus on those human connections. That's some of the things that I'm hearing from our discussion today, that we've got to lean in much more, we've got to be much more flexible, we've got to think about mental health, but also we have to, at the same time, be prepared to understand that there is that creativity, and sometimes that creativity cannot happen virtually. You have to be in that face-to-face environment. And we're seeing that over here today. You have a lot of fun. I don't want to name any names, but I met a few colleagues that had had a few cocktails by lunchtime yesterday, and they were being pretty creative, and it's great. You've got to be in that face-to-face environment to be able to think about that. But then even on a most deeper operational aspect, which is obviously the lens that I come from, and many of us come from. We're all about operations, planning, thinking about the future. Well, planning feels slightly different today, doesn't it, Kate? Feels really different.
It does, and as another operational person, I love this part. I mean, I think there's also something that parallels. When I started in games, we were making games with 40, 50 people for a pretty big game. And now for some of these big titles, hundreds and hundreds across the globe. At EA, and we've been making games globally for a long time, but this has taken it to the next level. One of the things we've learned is you have to be able to have teams working asynchronously. So there's that human aspect and connection, but we've done a lot of learning and leaning in on what kind of production rigor can we put in place so people really understand what's going on, even if they're not sitting next to someone. So we had that jump before with getting to bigger and bigger teams, and now we're going to have more and more people working at different times, which I think is it's an interesting opportunity, it's a challenge, but as we lean into live service and ongoing content creation, I think this is a space where we're going to be seeing more. But I love this asynchronous work. Can you be responsible enough with what you're doing that when it goes to the next person, they don't need to come back to you to proceed? it puts extra rigor up front, but like that's an operational joy. So I'm here for it.
Oh, I love that. I love hearing about all that operational rigor, that seamless environment, true operational talk. It's just so nice. You know, some of the things that we're looking at in our own organization is that because we have those virtual environments, we have video screens. So when you have that follow the sun model from North America to Europe to Asia, we're able to connect with people virtually, but also they're able to see the way the teams are working. And it just does become seamless. And you do feel like you're part of a culture. But at the same time, we find that you need to travel. You need to be able to understand what are the core values of your brand? What's the culture of your organization? How are you supporting your customers? And sometimes the only way you get to do that is by traveling and by seeing people and being in that face-to-face environment. And isn't that what we need? We're working in an environment where many of our end consumers are our employees as well. So we're lucky to have that, and we have to continue to motivate them. But it means that, you know, our customers are the people that are working in our organization. They're our employees, they're our teams, they're our friends, as I would say, they're our mates. And at the same time, they're the people that we have to inspire to keep coming back into the office, to remember that we care, that we have the emotional relationship connection, and that we're going to lean in. And with that, I just want to ask you, is there anything else you'd like to add as we come towards the end of our discussion?
The only thing I will say is that the thing we have not figured out how to do asynchronously is shut down big games. So when it comes to making content, when it comes to getting that done, but if anybody out here knows how to take a 1,000-person team working on Halo and like do that, and not to take away from anything you said, because it's just right, but I think that is one of the challenges, that there are still some things where, you know, I don't know any way how to take these giant games and get them across the finish line. At some point, everybody has to be in lockstep. Everybody's got to know what's going on. And, you know, that I think I've heard from just other people remains one of the things for us to figure out how we do that. And, you know, we certainly, with the stuff that we got into last fall, saw that. And you know, on travel, I think you're exactly right there. The one thing that's interesting about travel is that it has removed a little bit of what I'll call the headquarters effect. That the games that are closest to Redmond for us sort of have more access, or it's easy enough to talk to people. And I think that in some ways, what I'll call our studios like Rare in the UK or Compulsion Games in Montreal, it's made them feel a little less detached from what goes on in Redmond. So maybe there's a little bit of an upside that it's not so much about who has, you know, the face-to-face time or who gets visited the most. It has sort of helped a little bit with that.
Thank you. Kate?
I was just going to say, we've seen some of that as well. I was talking to one of our team leads who said, look, I can't have a team meeting because my team is too big to fit in a room. And so you get that democratization of engagement, which is very cool. And I hear you on the challenges of shutting down these big games. I will say the FIFA team has made some incredible advancements that we've been really pleased with. But a lot of that goes back to that rigor in thinking about how we're going to do it and knowing that we don't have one-size-fits-all approaches across the diversity of the content we make. But I think we covered off a lot of important topics. That was great.
Yeah, I'd like to echo some of what both of you said, and that I think as we have been looking at putting offices and other spots in order to tap into some of the talent that's around the world that we want to be able to work on our games and deliver for players, we've had to think a lot about how do we avoid that second-class citizen feeling amongst folks who aren't necessarily in LA, which was kind of the hub of everything for a long time. So we were trying to really work hard at changing a company culture to be, nope, the leadership of a game can be anywhere. And everyone is a first-class citizen. And that requires us to think about how we structure meetings, who attends things, how often we do travel, and try to make sure that we're setting ourselves up in a way that is somewhat egalitarian for the locations around the world. And I think some of that is going to get easier as technology catches up to the way that we're all working, and as we learn lessons from going back post-pandemic. But that's kind of the journey right now, is to figure out how to do that well.
Thanks
And
so
I don't know
much.
what it is about. I don't know how to shut down a game. We just do live services, so we just run them.
Yeah, and I was just going to jump in and say, you know, if you do have challenges, that's why Keyword Studios are here. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. I hope that we've shared some really insightful thoughts in terms of the Great Resignation. And if you want to talk about it to us, just reach out to us. I'm sure you know, I can already see just about see some familiar and non-familiar faces in the audience. So thank you so much, and have a great day. Speak to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.